Hello and welcome to another episode of Growing Organically for Wholesale Markets. Today we will talk about grading. For today's episode, we're going to pick up right where we left off. We're going to follow Dina Haynes to Appalachian Harvest so she can grade her acorn squash. We will have Scott Jarrell, the Scott County Extension Agent, explain exactly what a washing grading line is and what wholesalers are looking for when it comes to acorn squash.
Raw product would come in to the storage bin out of the field. It would be placed in the grading line itself. This is a washer and a grader. So as it comes through, it's going to go through a washing process with a sanitation solution. And what that's going to do, clean water will go through and we'll wash it. And we'll put a sanitation solution on it, which will keep any type of bacteria, fungus from invading the fruit. It goes on the rollers to start to dry it, and then it would go on the grading line itself. From the grading line, that's where you would go through the procedures for the marketer, the buyer that you're going to have, what their definitions of grades are, and then you would sort them according to the size and maturity that they're looking for a number one or number two or a reject. It's really important when you work with your marketers to make sure you know exactly what it is they're looking for. Of course, that's going to be a number one squash as far as size goes, maturity goes. And then once you get through harvesting before you box, you want to cut the stem to about 1 inch. Part of that reason is you want the stem where you don't have an open wound in the squash itself where it's going to set up for disease. But the other thing is you don't want them too long where they're going to cause damage to the other fruit in the box. When we start to look at fruit like this, and that one's probably not been pollinated very well, you can see where one side has grown faster than the other. But also it's an immature, you can see where it's starting to turn, but that's just an immature fruit. Same way when we look at ones like this is a good fruit as far as pollination goes, but still it's number two just for off the size. And then if you look at the spot, you're still at about 50-cent piece, but because of the size on one like that, that would be a number two. The other thing you want to look for is any damages or disease. You can see where that one's had a soft spot in it. Looks like there's been a little bacteria that started in it. And then when it's got mashed in on a box or on a stem, it's pushed it in. If you look at it, it's actually dried right now. So what are the chances that that's going to last? With it being dry, pretty good. But for a market, they're going to see that as a potential rot issue, and that's going to be a cull. Same way again, there's not a whole lot of a spot on it. Disease and insects are the other thing. You can see where insect feeding, probably the cucumber beetles have been on this one. Even though it's a good size, even though it's within the parameters as far as maturity goes, that'd be a cull. So when you're looking at them, we're looking for size, we're looking for maturity. This, even though it doesn't have a spot on it, it's still probably a number one just because of the quality and grade that it is. At least that's where I would put it, in a number one box, and hopefully it's going to go ahead and ripen on up because it's still hard enough that it's a mature squash. You can start to look at the stem. Every now and then you'll see those little star dots on it. That's a microdopium blight. Flectosporium is what it used to be. And in organics, it's going to be hard to control 100% of it for sure. In conventional, it's hard to control, but getting with one of the specialists or the agents, Millstop, Sonata, and some of those other things are labeled for some of these blights and the mildews, and it'll at least cut it down to where you don't have it on the fruit. And it's not as much an issue with it on the stem because that's going to dry up anyway.
Size, shape, weight, damage, and disease all play major factors when determining the grade of your produce. Here, you can see what was graded as a USDA number 1. These were essentially perfect. They do not have any damage or disease. They were all perfectly mature. Here, you can see what was graded as a number 2. Minor damage, but no disease, no bite marks from animals, and some of them are a little misshapen, but they're all mature to be qualified as a graded number 2. A USD number 2 is good enough to eat, nutritiously the same, however it can't be sold to wholesale markets. So graded number 2s are perfect for donating to a food bank, selling at your local farmer's market, or even selling to a value-added producer. A graded number 3 is anything worse than this. Anything that has major damage, anything that has disease starting to surface on it, anything that's completely unshapen, rotting, or just doesn't look like you want to eat it. This can be used for your compost. Once all your produce is graded, simply box it up and make sure that it weighs what it should.
So maybe something that's not quite as perfect, but still passes as a 1. We can have it in there. I definitely don't want the stems poking into somebody next to them. So the ones I put in the bottom, I always turn them to the outside. And then I'll usually take the next ones and I'll put them down in so that nothing touches them. And I've been handling them since they were seeds. And when you get to this point, you want to just make sure that they do not scratch each other. Needs to be 35 pounds. Let's see. Right at 31. So that one was about 2.25. That's good.
That's all for today's episode. Hope to see you next time on Growing Organically for Wholesale Market for our final episode, where we will be talking about lessons learned and how to prepare yourself for next year. See you then.